South Africans are celebrating Dricus Du Plessis' loss. Why would a country celebrate its own champion losing? Well, it all changed after this interview.
And no, this is a great opportunity for me to step up and fight on the biggest scale in the world and to talk about things. I mean, South Africa is going through so much. If you look at the political stance, we have 4 murders. That's really taking the whole country by storm. It's something unbelievable. People are getting murdered daily, and it's almost like I feel because it's Africa, a lot of the world doesn't see it, and it's like nobody in the world really knows what's going on there. And I just want to shout out to South Africa, to my South African people, the folks, and say, guys, stay strong. We can beat this battle, and I just get this opportunity on the biggest stage in the world to say, let's stop the 4 murders, and I want the world to see what's happening in South Africa. And it's such a beautiful country. It's really one of the most beautiful countries in the world that's being ruined by stuff like this, and we don't need that. And let's stick together as a country, let's stick together as humanity, and let's beat this thing.
At the time, AfriForum was going around lying about a white genocide happening in farms. So yes, he didn't say white farm murders, but it was implied. A narrative that white farmers are being systematically targeted and killed. A narrative that has been heavily politicized.
We do not have a genocide in South Africa.
This South African farmer wants to set the record straight. He wrote an open letter to US President Donald Trump after Trump offered Afrikaner farmers refugee status.
Is there a white genocide in South Africa?
No, there's no sign of it, never has been. In fact, whites are economically the strongest group. They benefited from democracy more than anybody else. 64% of all boardrooms in South Africa are still white. The average income of white South Africans are vastly higher than black South Africans. No, there are better schools, there are better education, private health care. This is the land of milk and honey if you're white.
After that interview, it felt like he was aligning himself with a very specific political agenda that many see as racist. It showed a stunning lack of awareness, or worse, a lack of empathy, because there are more black farmers being killed than white. It's hard to get behind a champion who seems to have no regard for the pain and history of the majority of his own country. And the second thing was his constant claim that he is the first African champion.
You say you're not just the first South African UFC middleweight champion, you're the first African champion.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's a lot of fighters with African heritage and champions with African heritage, but I am the only fighter in the UFC, the only champion in the UFC, in the history of the UFC, that was born, raised, residing, and trained in Africa, and I still live here. And that is special. That is special.
He says this because he was born, raised, and trained on the continent. It sounds innocent, but let's not forget our history. Not too long ago, we had beaches, benches, and even sports teams that were labeled Europeans only. Now, all of a sudden, you want to call yourself an African. Rand DDP calls himself the first African champion. Ignoring the other champions before him feels like he's claiming a title that was denied to generations of black athletes who were just as talented but were simply not given the chance. So that's why they moved to another country, because your ancestors destroyed Africa. You can't just ignore the history. They want to acknowledge the history only if it benefits them. But everything we have going on right now, we are being affected because of their ancestors, their white ancestors, who up this continent. So you can't just ignore that. So yes, Easy left Nigeria and Kamaru Usman left Nigeria, but that doesn't make them less African. Okay? Just because you were able to live in South Africa because of the benefits that your parents had after apartheid, it doesn't make it right for you to tell other Africans that they are not African enough just because you stayed in Africa after you benefited from apartheid. And you'll find people saying, no, he didn't say they're not African enough. What does he imply by saying, I'm the first African champion? It means the other ones are fake African champions. Just because you don't say something doesn't mean that you're not implying it. Do you know that white people in South Africa get paid more than Indian, colored, and black people for the same job? The system works for them, even if they choose to ignore its existence. So when Du Plessis lost, it was a victory against a narrative that refuses to acknowledge the history. It was a message that you can't claim our identity and our heritage without respecting our struggles. And white South Africans love ignoring the history of apartheid because they feel ashamed. Right now, history won't be compulsory in grade 10 to matric. If that's not ignoring history, then I don't know what is. So yes, I cheered when he lost, because his loss, in a strange and painful way, felt like a small win for people who are still fighting to be seen, to be heard, and to finally be recognized as the true heartbeat of this continent. Being African is more than just where you were born or where you live. It's about understanding the history of this continent, the struggles of its people, and the systematic inequalities that Black Africans have endured for centuries. In that sense, white South Africans have a responsibility to earn their African identity, not just by living here, but by acknowledging the past and respecting the struggles of Black South Africans and contributing to building a truly inclusive society.
Man, for no reason, who felt the need to defend the United States of America when they were discussing the level of corruption, who came out and said, no, you don't understand. My country is the most corrupt country in the world. Which is not only not true, but a very well-known Afrikaner dog whistle. And after the same man won his belt, the next time you saw him defend it, he took the UFC Countdown series to the Voortrekker Museum and spoke about how he was motivated by the sacrifices of his people. Sacrifices of who? Oh, and by the way, he went back there again in March this year to shoot the cannon, specifically in solidarity for a lack of service delivery. Another dog whistle. He wore a shirt. It said Trump prefers winners. Right after Trump literally announced that he was planning on cutting funding to his home nation pending an investigation of this conspiracy theory. Which, by the way, has already been proven to not be true by the United Nations Human Rights Council, and whose consequences are affecting the lives of everyday South Africans and will affect them even more. Even IOL took the time to point out that this whole no DNA, just RSA thing doesn't work if you're working with Trump's rhetoric. But then they got right on board because vibes. I haven't even mentioned the whole I'm the only African champion issue, because I feel like we have enough evidence to show that, look, I know this is someone's champion, but it's not my champion. I can point to the communities that have been negatively affected by this man's reign. And although this is not my own way of doing things, I do like the fact that this country has a way of dealing with being in a position where someone who does not represent you is being told represents you. I don't care if I'm alone, but I'm going to watch